It was a brutal week for injuries. Tyreek Hill and Malik Neighbors are done for the year. Some new backfields are wide open. That means there are some league-winning pickups sitting on your waiver wire right now. In this video, I'll walk you through every position: running back, wide receivers, even a quarterback and a tight end, so you know exactly who to prioritize, how much fab to spend, and which guys I'm looking to stash for now, just in case their role increases moving forward. Let's get into it. The big pickup of the week is obviously Woody Marks. Now, this is a great example of why we need to pay attention to the underlying utilization and not just the raw touch number. He had 17 carries in this game in week 4 that accounted for 58% of the Texans rushing attempts on Sunday. And he looks like an obvious waiver wire pickup, right? And he is. Because of the fact that he had 17 carries in this game, he was very involved in the receiving game. He scored on the ground, through the air. He looked great. But while he only had 6 carries in week 3, he still had a 40% rushing share, which is pretty significant. His 49% snap share in week 3 was also pretty significant. That only went up to 58% this week. So the signs were there after week 3, and he should have been picked up last week. We talked about it on last week's show, that if you needed a running back, he was the guy to prioritize after Trey Benson. But when you watch Marks in this game, he looked great. He was elusive, he was weaving through traffic, showed great vision, and I have to say, I'm personally surprised. I can't lie. You look at his after contact numbers throughout his career: 24th percentile in the Power 5 over the last 10 years. His missed tackle rate, 22nd percentile. That's absolutely objectively terrible. But hey, he's getting the opportunity and he's looking good. So what can I say? What doesn't surprise me is what he's showing in the receiving game. That's something he's really been known for throughout his college career. The most receptions over the last 10 years in the Power 5 belongs to Woody Marks, the 6th most receiving yards. And now it's looking like he's the lead back for the Texans. And on top of all that, his head coach, D'Amico Ryans, said that he's excited to see how much more they can put on his plate. So that's even more encouraging to hear, that there's more room for him to go. Now, I don't know if I'm dropping the entire bag on Marks when it comes to your fab budget, because it's very possible Nick Chubb is still involved, but I am willing to go up to 50% of my fab. And if you're really desperate at the position, do what you got to do. Let's talk about the Giants wide receivers without Malik Neighbors out for the year. We have to talk about the fallout. Wan'Dale Robinson, Darius Slayton, Theo Johnson. These are the 3 guys we're looking at on waivers. Robinson should have been rostered in most leagues, but he hasn't really come through since week 2. Now, he was above 25% target share in 3 of the 4 games so far this year. So he does profile as the guy who will likely lead this team in targets. He would be the first person I grab, but because of his short depth of target, he was only at 0.8 yards on average per target this week. PPR leagues is where I would really prefer him. Even half PPR leagues, I might lean towards Darius Slayton, because I do think overall, I think Slayton offers a little bit more upside. Now, less insurances, maybe a little bit more risky, but he's going to be targeted downfield. 16.5 average depth of target this past week. He did get a 20% target share from Dart on Sunday, right? So not too far behind Wan'Dale, and 75% of his targets were catchable from Dart. Now, we don't know how good Jaxson Dart will be, right? He looked solid last week, but he also didn't have a lot of pass volume. Last year, with this same coaching staff, in 2 games without Malik Neighbors, he had 11 targets in each of those games, 35 and 32% target shares. So they clearly came into that game and said, this is the guy we want to target. This is the guy we want to base our passing game around when Malik Neighbors isn't on the field. So there is some potential here for sure, and he's the upside play. So if you're trying to decide between these 2 guys, I think he's the upside guy. Wan'Dale's probably the safer floor PPR guy. And then at tight end, you have Theo Johnson. He only ran a route on 63% of dropbacks in this game, but he had a 25% target share. And coming into the game, he was at 73% route participation. So it is possible that that goes up with the need for extra pass catching weapons for Jaxson Dart. So if you're in need of a tight end, I think there's some potential here. I don't think I'd be grabbing him over guys like Darren Waller, who we'll get to in a second, Brenton Strange, or Harold Fannin Jr. All 3 of these guys might be available on waivers, and I prefer these 3 guys over him. I think it's a little bit of a coin toss between Mason Taylor, who, by the way, looked like the clear number 2 option behind Garrett Wilson last night when the Jets went against the Dolphins, but I would pay attention to this tight end situation on the Giants, just in case he does end up getting peppered without Malik Neighbors. And that leads me to Jaxson Dart. Yes, no Malik Neighbors, which absolutely blows, considering that Dart did show a lot of promise this past Sunday. It just makes you think what could have been. But still, that first drive by Jaxson Dart was awesome. 10 carries, 50 yards, and a touchdown on the ground. What more can you ask? Now, he doesn't have the best weapons in the world, but they are serviceable. And the most important thing here is his rushing ability and the team's willingness to use it. 18% designed rushing attempts for Dart. That was tied for first among all quarterbacks in week 4. 11% scramble rate. That was 6th among all all quarterbacks in week 4. He finished as a QB1 in his first start. Regardless, even if you're in one quarterback league, I think Jaxson Dart needs to be rostered. Let's talk about the Bucs running back situation for a second, because Bucky Irving, he looked amazing on Sunday. RB1 finish. This is what we've been waiting for with the utilization that we saw in the first 3 weeks, but he just got an MRI. And officially, we don't know what the injury is, but unofficially, we think it's an ankle injury. But man, like, he looked fine to me throughout the game, even after when like the suspected ankle injury occurred. Hopefully he's fine, but it is possible he's limited in practice this week, and Rachaad White has a bit of a larger role this upcoming week. Worst case, Bucky has to miss some time, in which case Rachaad White, for me, he's the back that I want over Sean Tucker. He's the one who's been getting some short yardage work lately. He's the one who's going to be involved in the receiving game. Listen, Tucker has some upside. We've seen it in the past, but White is the one that this coaching staff trusts between the two. And if Bucky Irving misses time, I think Sean Tucker will definitely be involved and he's worth an ad. But, you know, hopefully this is all a moot point, because all we really want to hear is for Bucky to be just fine and that MRI to just have been for precautionary purposes. Moving on, you guys know I've always been a Kendre Miller stan, always have been, always will be. The question has never been whether the guy has ability. It's always been, does he have availability? He's been able to stay healthy. By the way, I'm crossing my toes as I say this. And as a result of Alvin Kamara not necessarily being the most efficient runner this year, or even over the past few years, to be honest with you, Miller is getting more work. 33% of the rushing attempts in week 4. Kamara owned 69% of the Saints rushing attempts coming into this week. That dropped all the way down to 50%. At the very least, Miller is a very good handcuff. But look at what he marks now. Like, maybe we can potentially get ahead of this situation now instead of next week, when all of a sudden we're seeing Miller get more carries than Kamara. For most people, that would be out of nowhere, but for you, maybe not. And why would Kendre get more rushing work than Kamara? Well, maybe because among 42 running backs with at least 25 carries this season, Kendre Miller is number 1 in forced missed tackle rate. Kamara is 27th. Kendre Miller has also gained 2.1 yards after contact per attempt. Kamara, 1.75. That ranks 38th of those 42 running backs. It wouldn't be crazy. I would stash Kendre Miller. Another stash at running back is Tyjae Spears. The Titans offense, shit show, but they need some juice. If Spears is ready, and by the way, they just activated him off the IR, so now they'll have 21 days to put him on the active roster. Not 100% sure whether that's going to happen this week or not, but we've seen some big games from him at the end of last year. Low-key helped a lot of people win fantasy championships. His run was from weeks 15 to 17. The real ones know. He was the RB5 during that span, and Pollard played in 2 of those games, but Spears got it done in the receiving game those weeks when Pollard played. 6 catches for 87 yards and a touchdown, 3 catches for 39 yards, but also ended up scoring 2 touchdowns on the ground with Pollard active. Now, I remember Pollard was a little bit banged up, but still, you know, Spears was able to make a big impact, and I think he's worth rostering for the upside because he's good. He's a good, talented running back that could see some opportunity in negative game scripts, especially with the Titans, how bad they are. Like, he could see a lot of run. All right, let's talk about Romeo Doubs and his 3 touchdown performance on Sunday night against the Cowboys. I just want to remind everyone, he had 2 targets in week 3. I also want to remind everyone that he had a 2 touchdown game last year as well. He followed it up with a great game the following week. 8 catches for 94 yards on 10 targets. Great. But after that, not much. And then he had a 2 touchdown game again in week 15, and then followed that up with a 3 target game, 4 fantasy points. Complete boom bust here. I think you can definitely do worse. Doubs should be rostered, but just warning you, I wouldn't depend on him moving forward. He's on the field a lot, but he hasn't shown that he's a target earner. 22% target share in this game. It's solid, but not super sticky. Last week, Matthew Golden and Dontavian Wicks led with 16% each, and Doubs only had 8%. And I didn't even mention Tucker Kraft, who also had 15% himself over the last 2 weeks, and could have had 2 touchdowns, by the way, in this game if he didn't get caught at the 1 yard line twice. Just saying, it's going to flip-flop, but Doubs should be rostered. He can be started as a boom-bust flex wide receiver. All right, let's talk about the Tyreek Hill fallout. Absolutely brutal injury for Tyreek Hill last night. Absolutely gross. Knee dislocation, multiple ligament tears as a result, including his ACL. So he's out for the year. So now what? What do we do? Who do we pick up? Now, what I was hoping for in this situation was that Malik Washington would be the clear pickup, right? But he was not the wide receiver to clearly take Tyreek's place. That was Nick Westbrook-Ikhine. If you remember, he was the dude who pretty much averaged a touchdown per catch last year. Malik basically continued to play his slot role. Now, is it possible that they play more 3 wide receiver sets to give Tua more weapons? You know, and to be honest, let him throw it to one of his favorite guys in Malik Washington. That was the case in the preseason, and on a per route basis this year, Washington is being targeted at a 17% rate. Waddle was at at 18%, you know, through 4 weeks. So if he gets more routes, we could see some more targets. So I do like adding Washington, but more so in deeper PPR leagues. He also got 2 targets as well in this game. So if he can get like 6 to 7 targets plus some work out of the backfield, he could be fantasy relevant. We also have to consider Darren Waller as well. Only ran 10 routes last night, but 2 of his 4 targets came in the end zone for touchdowns. Not a full-time player just yet, but I would imagine that they ramp him up as we go on. So if you're in need of a tight end, you can do worse than Darren Waller. Just pray that he stays healthy. I appreciate you guys watching this video. If you want the full waiver wire rankings plus fab recommendations throughout, go to upperhandfantasy.com. I'll see you guys tomorrow.